Okay, this is going to be a quick introduction to using the tangent element control panel for coloring in DaVinci Resolve. This is not going to be comprehensive. I'm not going to cover everything, but I want to give you the basics so you can get going using this. And so what I want to focus on are some of the most common things you would do and the ways where you can use this and speed up your workflow and make yourself more efficient and also more precise with what you're doing with pretty little effort. There's a ton the control panel can do. And so if you really get into coloring, I'd suggest going in and learning a lot more of the things you could do, but I wanted to focus on the basics for today. I want to focus most of this on the coloring side, but I did want to talk quick about the rightmost panel, which is your sort of navigation panel. That's this right here. There's two menus, an A menu and a B menu. And the A menu mostly has to do with moving around within a shot and doing keyframes and such. So that would be something that if you get more into coloring, in particular if you're doing some keyframing, you could work on. My advice for the moment would be to start with menu B, which is largely your node controls. Across the top row here, and I guess a quick reminder that the way the panel is set up is it uses a lot of soft keys, so none of these are permanently assigned a function. To know what a particular button's doing, you have to know what menu or submenu you're in, and those are listed up here. So I can see across the top row it says add serial, add parallel, add layers. That means the top row of buttons is add serial node, add parallel node, add layer node. And then you can see there's 3 columns and 4 rows, and there's 3 columns and 4 rows of buttons. This will tell you what each one does. In some submenus, not all of the buttons in a particular panel may do something. So you might have some buttons that don't do anything. In this case, over on the leftmost panel here, if you look at Master Menu A, you can see that there's only 3 rows of buttons, and the third one is partial. So this bottom row of buttons in this case is doing nothing. If I hit them, nothing happens because they're not assigned to any function at that point. Okay, so back to the navigation panel over on the far right. So like I said, the easiest thing you can do with these is just manipulating your nodes. So if I wanted to add another serial node, hit that and it shows up. If I wanted to add a parallel node to that one, I can hit add parallel, middle top. And you'll see what showed up here is it added a parallel node here to my original node I had, and then a parallel mixer to put them together. I'm going to undo that, Command Z. And if I wanted to add a layered node over here on the far right, I can add that, and you can see that does the same thing. It adds a second node, but in this case it's layered. And you'll remember we talked about in class, parallel node, both things, or as many things as I have put together here, all get processed and get sort of mixed together at the end, combined. The layer mixer, whatever areas I'm affecting on this node are going to be left alone on this node. It's kind of like if you think about if I had multiple layered nodes here. Back there, add another layer node. So I have 3 here. These are going to be processed with this kind of on top, so anything that gets affected here will show up no matter what I do on these, and then this, whatever stuff was left, I could affect some of it here, and that will then not be affected by this. So you can kind of think of this as almost the reverse of the way you would think about it. So the bottom one is what kind of shows up on top. So anything that's done here I'll always see, and then anything done here I'll only see what affects areas that weren't already done here. And this is sort of, even though it's the top in the way the Resolve lays things out, it's the bottom one, and we'll just do things that whatever was left over that hasn't been affected by these. Okay, I'm going to undo, because I really wanted to focus on coloring for this, but that's just a quick example of adding those. And you can see this second row, I have a delete node, so I could get rid of that one. I have, let me put one back, so I have 2 nodes again. I have enable disable node, so whatever node I have selected, I can sort of toggle that on and off. This is really handy to see what a particular node is doing. I have enable disable all to toggle all the nodes on and off. I have some still controls, which we didn't talk about in class, but I can use those to grab a still image that I might want to compare something to. So if I have a shot I'm trying to match, I can grab that and then compare shots to it. And then I have previous node and next node here to move between my various nodes. Okay, so that's my navigation here. I also have play controls to play a shot, forwards, backwards, pause it, and shots buttons to jump between shots. So I can go to the next shot or go to the previous shot. So that's a quick way to move around. The ring control on here will also scroll through my footage. You can see it doing that. It's a little jumpy. It's not keeping precisely up, but it's handy if I want to be able to scroll through the clip and see what a color is looking like without having to go to my regular play controls or use my mouse. The ball in this case does nothing. Okay, so with the navigation panel out of the way, what I'd like to walk through is some of your basic coloring controls, which are what's going to be done with the other three panels. So these two over here that you're going to see work together very closely, and then this third one, which is going to be my main sort of coloring controls. So first thing I'm going to do is over here on this leftmost panel, again I have some soft buttons. I have an A menu and a B menu, and these are going to be how I kind of control what those other two panels are doing, these knobs and these wheels here. And you can see it actually says master menu, so kind of telling you I'm controlling other things. So master menu A, master menu B, and as you can see, there's a whole bunch of things we can control in here. A couple that we're not going to get into, but that I will just point out because we talked through some of them in class. I do have a blur menu here. So this would be if I want to adjust the blurring on a shot, and you can see that's blurring. If I go back to menu A, I have my curves here. And these would be on screen some of these controls. You remember there are various curves we could control, and I have some ways I can control that with the menu, but I'm going to go back out of that. And sizing controls, top left here. So this could be if I need to move around my shot, so if I need to punch in on something a little bit or adjust the shot, I can do all of those things there. So I encourage you to play with those. Those are some things that you are more interested in. A reminder of something I mentioned in class, all of these knobs are, if I just click on them, those will reset. So I'm just going to reset anything that I may have messed up with on the zoom there. Go back into my main menu. One other thing I forgot to mention is if I was shooting for a different aspect ratio, I'd sure like to know in here what that looks like. So I can go in the timeline menu to output blanking and select what the aspect ratio that I'm actually going to be outputting is. In this case, this was a project shot for 239, so you can see it puts the black bars in there. And what that allows me to do is, let's say I needed to adjust the height on this shot a little bit. I can go to my tilt control here and move it, and I can see exactly how much I have. So at this point, I've sort of gotten farther than I can go. And then at this point, I can say, okay, I've moved it down, but I still had enough leeway in the top there where the black bars were going to be covering it. Same thing on the other side. If I wanted this police car more centered, I actually have sort of all the way to there, right about here, where I still had some extra footage that those bars are covering. So I can always do that. I'm going to reset this back to the original position here. I'm also going to just try to make this view a little bigger on here. I'm working off my laptop, and so I'm going to see if we can get some more workspace. Okay, so I just tried to rearrange things a little bit. I don't have a lot of real estate, but I was able to at least hide my clips so we can see things a little bit better. Lots of coloring things I could do. This is some red footage, so I could go in here and adjust the clip data in terms of the raw, What I want to focus on is what I can do with the tangent panel. So my bread and butter is going to be in menu A, top center, primary. So these are my primary corrections. And you'll see that that now makes this control a whole bunch of things in the primary. I also have some other options over here of things. And this makes these controls over here correspond to my lift, gamma, and gain here. So you can see if I move this wheel here, so this is my lift, those are going to be my low end darker stuff. So if I start to turn this counterclockwise to pull it down, you can see right here this is darkening things, this is coming down. So this is my level if it's going up or down, so that was to darken things. And then I also have a color shift, so if I want my darkest areas to, let's say, shift redward, redward you can see in here is about like 11 o'clock. So I'm going to push my wheel up towards 11 o'clock, and everything shifts red. You can see this move. The advantage of this is I have a lot more precision. You'll notice I had to turn this pretty far to get any sort of effect. I can be really precise and subtle about this in a way that's kind of hard to do with the mouse where I'm just sort of dragging things. If I do something I don't like, for each of the three, I have these reset buttons here. The one that looks like a dot resets the ball in the middle, the color. So if I hit that, that brings that back to center. The one on the outside that looks like a ring resets the rings. This will pull my lift back to where it was. So that's my lift. On the high end, I have my gain. So that would be affecting the brightest areas. So I can turn this up and really bring up those brights, or I could turn it down and bring my brights darker. Again, let's say I wanted to shift color. Maybe I want this a little more sunsetty in those brights. I'm going to shift towards the left and a little bit up. It's kind of my yellowish orange. And kind of warm those up a little bit. And again, if I didn't like something I did, I have my reset buttons here. And then finally, my gamma is the mid-range, so I can make that darker. I can make that brighter. I can reset it. And I can also shift the color. So maybe if I wanted my mid-ranges, let's say to go the other way, go a little bit blue for whatever reason, I can shift those that way. Okay, so those are my primary controls. You'll notice I also have this offset option here. You might think that the fourth wheel over on the right on the navigation panel would control that. Unfortunately, it doesn't. That is mapped to the sort of scrolling within the shot like I showed you. But I do have offset controls built in here. So you can see master offset, red offset, green offset, and blue offset. So that's master, red, green, blue here. So let's say my whole picture was too bright. I can just change my master offset to darken it or brighten it. And then if I don't like what I did, I can always click this to reset it. If I really wanted to, let's say, add some red to the entire shot, I could offset my red upwards like that. I could add some green and make it more yellow, and then I could say I don't like that and reset both of those. So these are my primary controls. Like you saw, I can do a lot with the wheels. I also have two knobs over here that are worth noting, my contrast and saturation. So if I want to just up the contrast on the whole shot, sort of shift things, doing it way too much, shift the dark things darker and the bright things brighter, I can do that. If I wanted to do saturation, that's also on the left panel, one knob down. So this is this third one. You can see I can make things really saturated or really desaturated there. And these are all available in my primary correction. So again, primary was master menu A, top center. My master menus on this panel, A and B, I can always jump back to that sort of root level just by hitting A or hitting B. So if I was in primary and I wanted to jump right to master menu B, I can do that. If I was in something else, let's say I was in log mode, jump to master menu A, I can hit these. So these two buttons will always take you back to sort of that highest level master menu, and I can jump in from there. So as you start learning this, if you know you're going to spend a lot of time in your primaries, great one to learn is menu A, top center, boom, and now everything's set for my primary correctors right here, and I can work with those, and you saw that pulled that up here. As I move into different modes, you'll see it does update what's happening on the screen. So since I mentioned primaries, I should mention log mode. So I can get to this from my master menu. This is the top right here. So there's log mode. And if you watch carefully right here, you'll see if primaries use lift, gamma, and gain, my log mode will shift everything to shadows, midtones, and highlights. These now are controlling that same thing, so I can adjust my shadows. Don't have a ton here, but I do have some highlights. So if I pull my highlights brighter, you can see those really pulling up. And the difference between the two is if you look at what my log mode is doing, you'll see as I'm adjusting that it's just adjusting the top part of the scale and nothing else. If I'm down here at the bottom, it's actually not adjusting a whole lot, just the very bottom of that and nothing else. The midtones would do that middle range brightness. This is different, reset all of those, from when I'm in my primary mode. So for instance here, if I do this, the lift, you'll notice it's shifting the lowest parts, the darks, the most, but it's shifting the whole curve a little bit. So primaries are a lot smoother and cleaner because you get this sort of gentle taper off as they get out of their sort of core range. The log mode is more precise in that it only affects a limited range of the image, but you can get these things where if something's sort of right on the cusp of being affected or not, if it changes a little bit in brightness, its coloring can change dramatically because there's not this sort of gentle roll off. You're either affecting it or you're not. So you want to be careful with your log mode, but it's handy for sort of isolating, like I really just want to do something with the brightest parts or the darkest parts of the image. So again, in my master menu A, top right will take me there. Usually I don't get there that way because most of the time I'm working in my primaries, and you'll notice for my primaries, my bottom center button will always take me to log mode, and I can work from there, and then once I'm out of there, this third down far right button will take me back to my primaries. So I can always switch between them that way without having to go through the master menu, but I can always go back there if I need to. When you're in log mode, just one thing to be aware of, I do still have my offset controls, my contrast and saturation, just like I did in the primaries, but they've moved. So in the primaries, my offsets were down here, and then I had contrast and saturation. Contrast and saturation have now shifted down, so contrast was here, now it's here, saturation was here, now it's here, and my offset controls shifted from this chunk here up to this chunk here, so you want to be aware of those. I think that would make a lot more sense if they stayed in the same place, but it's not something you can remap and resolve, unfortunately. So you just have to learn that. And the other things I'll point out in log mode is I have low range and high range here. Those are my controls for where that break changes. So the low range, which is indicated right here, so you can see I can adjust it with this knob, move it up or down, tells me where's that cutoff between the lows and the mids. And then the high range tells me where's that cutoff between the mids and the highs. So I can use those to adjust exactly where the break between shadows, midtones, and highlights are. In particular, something where I will use log mode a lot is when I'm just trying to really isolate my darkest blacks and do something with those, for instance, making sure that they are black and don't have some color seeping into them. And so that's something where I'll shift my low range pretty low and say, whoops, I really just want to work with, like the bottom, 10 or sometimes even like 5% of the image. You'll see where this is changing. It's on a scale from 0 to 1. So right now you can say I'm at like 12%. So I could say I really just want to affect that like bottom 10% of the image with my shadows. And then I can adjust that and know I'm not messing with anything that already wasn't pretty dark. So it would be where I'd use those. Okay, so those were primaries and log and kind of the basics of using those. The other two things that are handy to, I think, learn pretty quickly are both in the B menu. So I'll go to my master menu B. And one of these is my Hsl Qualifier, top left here. This is the thing you're used to seeing, where it gives me the eyedropper and I can isolate a particular color. So let's say I wanted the road in this case. I can sort of click on this. Whoops, and actually let's give myself a new node, because I was still working off what I had before. So I'm just sort of coloring a little bit there. And I did that with the mouse. So Master Menu B, and then this top left button. Yeah, Master Menu B, top left, Hsl Qualifier, takes me into these controls. I personally find it easiest to, in terms of the eyedropper, actually go into the image here, and I can zoom in and out and find sort of precisely where the point is that I want to be working with. And now I got some ranges here. I can mess with those in the mouse. I also have some controls over these here. So you see there's, this was in my A menu. I have my hue controls. So you can see I can change the sort of center on that. I can change the width on that. In B menu, I have my saturation and luminance controls. So if, let's say I wanted to grab some brighter stuff, I'm going to look at luminance, high clip right here, and I can grab that. If I wanted that to be softer, I can adjust this. So I have all those controls here. I'll say those are some things that you may find it's easier, particularly when you're starting out, to just do with the mouse, but you have controls over all of them here. Something I find really handy about this menu is the top center button here is highlight. And what this is that toggle where I can see what I have selected and what I don't. In this case, since I messed with a whole bunch of things, I don't have anything useful selected right now. Let me go back and grab some of that road again. Show me just the road. Okay, and now I can see what areas I have selected, see if I need to adjust this a little bit, you know. Maybe I want to pick up a little more stuff there. I'm not sure if I want these trees up here, so maybe I'm going to see if I can get rid of some of those. Back in my A, I do have up my blur radius here. I'll turn that up a little bit. And so now I can see what I have. This is really handy. It also works with power windows and other things. This highlight it's the same thing as clicking on this magic wand up here to show me what I have selected right now. Or more precisely, what this node is affecting, what parts of the image. And this is the easiest place to get to it on the board rather than having to go up here with the mouse and do this. So even if I'm working on something else, maybe I'd set up some power windows or something and I just want to see what they do, a lot of times I will do this quick B, HSL, turn on the highlight, and then I can go back to whatever I was doing. I can go back into primary mode if I want, or a window or something else, and that will stay highlighted until I go and either click on the magic wand here with my mouse or just go back here, B, qualifier, highlight, and turn that off. So that's a couple button clicks on here, but once you learn those, it's a very fast one to get into. Turn it on. I could be doing, say I'm back in my primaries, doing something else. Go back in there and back in my primaries. I can do that all very quickly. So that's what I do in my qualifier. And then the last one I want to show you is also in the B menu, top right, which is my power windows. So if I hit window, I'll go into the power window mode. And right now I haven't put any power windows on. My controls over here, that I'm going to ignore some of these for a second and kind of look over here and up here. These show different types of power windows I could put on. So my default one would be a circle. That's the top left. So I'd say a circle. And then second one down in the center here, on off. So I want to put on a circle. And I now have a window on there. Let's say I take that one off. The other two I use the most. One is a Polygon power window. So I can hit this, again, turn one on, and I get this sort of rectangle as a starting point. But the nice thing with this is if I need to get a very precise shape, I can just bring my mouse in here and click on it, and I can make as many sort of keyframes to this as I want to get a very precise shape. in this case, what might actually make more sense if I was doing something like trying to grab this road would be kind of outline the road there, and that way I don't have to be as precise with my Hsl qualifier. If I was also using one of those, I could also just use a power window to get the road, but that way I don't have to worry about whether I'm grabbing any of these trees or anything else, because it's just going to grab stuff inside here. I'm going to go ahead and turn that one off. And then the other thing I like to use a lot is a gradient power window. So that's the top center here, so gradient. I'll turn one on. And you'll see this just looks like a straight line. And if I do something on this, so let's say I kind of like darken down my mids, and let's actually darken everything. You'll notice even though I'm in a power window mode, this is still controlling my primaries right here. And also I forgot I still have a Hsl qualifier on this node. So I can go back here and just reset all of these and kind of grab everything. And now you can see what that gradient power window was doing. So everything on the back side of the line, it's affecting. Everything on the other side of the line, it's not. And then how long this arrow is tells me sort of how soft it is. So I could go in here with my mouse and grab the arrow and sort of soften that change. I could bring it back up here and get a sort of very sharp line. But you notice it also started to rotate. It's a little hard to get kind of precise control with that. This is something where I like to go in here. I have a rotate control, so I can put that back where it was, or rotate this to get a particular part of the image I want to do. I can also adjust the softness. So in this case, let's say I wanted just a real subtle gradient across the whole shot. I could actually move this whole thing way up here out of the shot. Zoom out so you can see where it is. And then make it just very softly go across the whole shot. So now you can see it's just really gradually getting darker up here and less dark as it goes down here. So that's a real subtle kind of grade. You can toggle that node. I mean, it's not subtle because I had darkened it so much, but even with a pretty ridiculous amount of darkening on there, when I've made it that soft, you don't really notice that so much. So power windows give you a lot of control there. That's my gradient one. You turn that off for a second and bring up a more traditional circle here. Just looking at the controls, I have an aspect control, size control, so I can make it bigger or smaller. Pan control, go side to side. Tilt control, up and down. Rotate to change sort of the orientation of that. And then softness, which is, again, sees sort of changing how gradually does that sort of fade out. So if I look like that, you can obviously tell there's something major going on there, but I don't see anything like a hard oval on here because I've softened it up so much at this point. Okay, and so those are my power window controls. I can stack multiple power windows. If I wanted to add another circle to this, top right here is add. So you can see the previous one I had there will stay there. And I have previous and next controls to move through those. And lastly, down here in the bottom, I have my track backward and track forward. I like those a lot because if I have something moving that I want to keep a power window around, I can use my tracking options there to have the power window move along with it. So that's really handy. And those are the basics of using the element control surface. So again, far right panel is my navigation, and I would say leave that on menu B. And then the other three are for coloring, and the key options I would suggest practicing with quickly is menu A, top center is my primaries. That's always where I can kind of go back to as my home base. And then in menu B, I have two on the top row. The top left is my qualifiers, and then the top right is my power windows. And when I'm in the power windows, these things are controlling that, and then these are still doing primary correction once I have those up. So those actually kind of remain in primary mode through most of the other options I can go through. The rings and balls will usually still control my primaries. And that's it. Hope that that's helpful. As I mentioned in class, my suggestion with the board is it doesn't take that long to get comfortable and get pretty quick at a few basic things, like doing your primaries and moving around through your nodes and adding nodes. Just give yourself, a little bit of time where you're going to force yourself to do everything on the board instead of resorting to the mouse, and that's kind of how you'll learn it. And after you've, gone into your primaries or gone into log or gone into your power windows a couple of times, you'll kind of build that muscle memory and it'll get second nature and you won't be thinking about going back to the mouse at that point. So that's that. Hope those are helpful for you and happy coloring.